Just a quick word to say the Scotland Rugby podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English for everything you need to know about the world of Scottish rugby. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby podcast.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast. It's that time again. Friday means Premiership preview, another juicy weekend to get stuck into. I'm Thomas Duncan, and chewing the fat with me is Stephen Craigan. Stephen, how are you?
I'm good, Thomas. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. Have you recovered from your trip back down from Pittodrie Thursday night?
Well, I have to say that, first of all, the game was a little bit of a sickener, wasn't it? Aberdeen losing the game, but then the pouring rain the whole way down the road certainly didn't make my journey any more enjoyable. So yes, I'm home safe and sound.
Hopefully not too bleary-eyed in any case. Right, let's crack on with the action. Saturday, huge game at Easter Road. Hibs hosting Celtic in the 3 o'clock kickoff. Commentary on Sports Sound exclusively. You can listen to that one. Definitely one to tune in for. Stephen, I'm very intrigued by Hibs for this game because Nick Montgomery came in. He's had a decent start. They went, I think it was 5 unbeaten. And then a tough 4-0 defeat at Ibrox. He kind of went for it with his 4-4-2 and he kind of stuck by it a bit after the game. So you're going to, the league leaders who are unbeaten, the champions. They put 4 past Hearts last week. Does he go same again? Surely he has to change something.
I have to say, Thomas, I thought he was a little bit naive last week. Not just even going with the formation, but just how they played. And I understand managers have philosophies and they have a style that they want to continually try and push on to the players. But sometimes you have to recognise the venue you're going to, the type of game you're getting into, and rather than trying to be open and expansive all the time and sometimes play unnecessary passes along the back and draw the opposition towards you, maybe play the game in their half for a little spell rather than always trying to dictate proceedings. Whether he will learn from that moving into this weekend or whether he maybe should have asked some of his staff who have been to Ibrox and been to Celtic Park previously with Hibs and just kind of tried to get a feel for the game, because it certainly meant they got punished. Does he change? He may change little bits and pieces within the game, whether that's recovery runs or positioning out of possession, maybe try and play forward a little bit quicker. So you're putting the onus on the opposition, you're trying to squeeze up the pitch, because there's no point in having a front two and possibly 2 wingers if you're going to continue to roll the ball across the back and not get the ball into them. So go forward to your centre forwards a little bit earlier, see if you can play a little bit further up the pitch, and then once the game settles down, go and try and impose your style. So it will be interesting to see how he responds, but also how his players respond, because you learn an awful lot more about your players in times of adversity. And when you're winning and drawing, it's nice, everyone pats each other in the back. So I think this week will have been a tough week in training, and it will be intriguing, you're right, to see how Hibs approach this one.
I'm fascinated by this concept of how teams take on the Old Firm. But, you're going up against better players, good managers, and, most teams probably say, let's defend our box, stay in the game for 60, 70 minutes and then see if we can get something at a set piece or a counter-attack or something. But certainly the bigger clubs, Hibs, Hearts and Aberdeen, have maybe a sense of, that they want to try and be a bit more ambitious and do more than that. And that goes for throughout the season. But we saw Stephen Naismith's Hearts last week against Celtic. They really struggled in possession at times. How do you go about, taking on the Old Firm and trying to get a win, especially at home with the fans behind you? Is it possible when you're coming up against what, as we say, is basically better players?
I don't think it's possible for 100 minutes if you add your added time on. I think you have to pick and choose when you think they're a little bit vulnerable. Is it maybe in transition? Is it, for maybe at the start of the game? But then you have to recognise as a team and as a manager of when the opposition are starting to dictate, they're starting to get on top. Then there's no harm in coming back and defending your box. But you always have to have that counter punch. You have to have a plan B that means you can get yourself up the pitch. Whether that's getting the ball into wide areas, particularly for Hibs, for Yuan or for Martin Boyle, the service into the centre forward has to be good. The hold-up play. There's so many little facets have to click for it to be right. But if you're going to be brave and bold and think that you can go toe-to-toe with the Old Firm for the entirety of a match, that's why I said I felt as if Nick Montgomery was a little bit naive. That isn't going to happen. So you have to give the players the game plan. You have to work on it. And that's something you do throughout the week, is actually set up little drills and you set up overloads in certain areas. You set up counter-attacking drills just so that the players are in that mindset. Hibs have certainly got players who can go and hurt Celtic. There's no doubt about it. but they won't do it for 90 minutes. They'll maybe do it for 10 or 15 minutes here and there. And that's then how you build into the game. And clearly when you play against them, if you get the first goal, it changes the whole dynamic of the game for me. But if you concede the first goal, it means eventually at some stage you have to open up and then they can go and pick you off.
Yeah, it should be said, Hibs did actually win the last meeting between these sides 4-2 at Easter Road at the end of last season, albeit Celtic had rotated their team and they'd already won the title. But it's not a new phenomenon with Nick Montgomery as well. You know, the other games last season, they lost 3-1, 4-0 and 6-1. So, you know, it's almost attack Celtic at your peril, isn't it?
Well, it is, because, and you know, Brendan Rodgers would love Hibs to come out and go toe-to-toe and play men up the pitch and give his team lots of space to play in, because, you know, week after week they're continually trying to break down defences and congested midfield, and, you know, there's no space in behind. They're always having to try and force the issue. The onus is usually on them to go and try and break down defences, whereas if, you know, a team comes out and opens up and is expansive and leaves lots of gaps, they will go and pick you off. They will punish you. I think maybe a couple of seasons ago, I remember going to watch Hibs against Celtic, and it was Ange's first season. Within like 20 minutes, I think they were 3-0 down because they went toe-to-toe and they thought they could do it. You know, you have to defend right first and foremost. You have to have a game plan. You can't just go out and hope players can make something up for themselves and hope that you have enough quality to go and hurt them. So Nick Montgomery, I would imagine, will have learned a few harsh lessons. I'd imagine the setup may be slightly different, as in the approach. It won't be all gung-ho and go after them. And as much as the home fans will be demanding that, I think there has to be, you know, a little bit of sense among the players and the manager of, you know, they have to pick and choose their moments.
And just on Celtic, Stephen, I think it's fair to say, even though they've been almost flawless apart from that draw with St Johnstone, there's a sense maybe that they're just starting to click into gear, which is probably concerning for the rest of the league.
It is, because there was all that talk at the start of the season about, you know, Celtic were a little bit more vulnerable because Brendan was in. They weren't in the groove. Could teams go and hurt them and punish them? And they've had, one league draw, you know, and they haven't really dropped many points. And you just sense now they're really going to start to turn the screw. I thought they were super slick against Atletico Madrid. I mean, the first 45 minutes is probably as good as it's been this season. You know, the challenge for Brendan and the players is to try and get close to that on a weekly basis. If you can't get close to it, you know, then can you have certain facets within the team that work as well as it did? You know, their one-touch play, their movement, their pace, their energy, everything about their game was really, really impressive. So going to Easter Road, lovely pitch, big wide areas. They'll be feeling good about themselves. Yes, disappointed they haven't won the game, but look at so many threats. You look at the bench, they've got so many options that if things aren't going well, they can continue just churn it out, churn over players. But the one thing is, when you're in the
I was going to say that, Stephen, actually, about the bench, because it is interesting, because obviously Rio Hatate went off with an injury midweek, and, you know, Brendan Rodgers didn't bring on O when Kyogo went off. And I do wonder, you know, when this is like the heat of the season where you've got games coming really, really thick and fast, you know, Europe every 2 weeks, plus, you know, there's a midweek card in the league as well. I do wonder whether, you know, maybe when we know Brendan Rodgers talked about maybe wasn't quite happy with some of the signings over the summer, whether that depth will be tested, because I think there's obviously no question the strength is starting 11, but when you're, you know, do you think that the squad depth is there to keep churning those results out and trying to progress in Europe?
I think it's certainly there for domestic football. It's almost, you know, Celtic really should be able to go make 6 or 7 changes and still go to Easter Road and win the game. And that's not underestimating Hibs. That's just showing the depth or the quality that Hibs have got. You know, if Hibs made 6 changes, they wouldn't be able to be competitive against Celtic. That's why, you know, the squad has been built. Yes, he was a little bit unhappy that maybe they didn't get a couple of signature signings in the summer, kind of bigger names. But there's no doubt that when you look throughout the likes of David Turnbull, Iwata, Lager Bielka, you know, these guys could come in and play no problem. And yes, they might be, you know, slightly undercooked compared to some of the guys who've been playing on a regular basis. But, you know, James Forrest is another one, Bernardo, you know, there's enough quality there to go and beat Hibs if Brendan Rodgers decided to change it. What he might do is like what Ange used to do, is try and get themselves 2 or 3 goals up, then ring the changes and try and get players off. But ultimately, his first thought will be, how do we win the game and what team's the best he thinks is to go and win it.
Yeah, that's sure to be a fascinating game. Tune in 3 o'clock commentary on Sports Sound Saturday afternoon. Let's move on to Fir Park, where Motherwell host Ross County. And this is a big game, I think, for your old club, Motherwell, Stephen. 4 straight defeats. You know, they played well against St Mirren, lost. Played well against Rangers, lost. Played well against Celtic, lost. And then maybe not so well against Livingston. And they've had a week off with 3 weeks off with the international break and then the postponed fixture. You just feel they need to start turning the tide, albeit performances have been good.
It's interesting looking at this fixture, Thomas, because it's one of the ones where it's really hard to pick a winner. Games like these probably determine what part of the league you're going to be in and where you're going to be fighting for. Because if you can go and get a win, whether it's Ross County or Motherwell, suddenly you create that little bit of gap. You kind of get one over on someone who's probably in the same budget as you, in the same area in the league as you. So if you can stretch away from them and win these head-to-head games. But you're right, Motherwell have, they had a good start. They've been unlucky in some games they've lost. Having the extra week off probably won't have helped the manager. Probably frustrated. They wanted to get back onto the pitch as soon as he possibly can, trying to rectify their poor run. And saying that, I think John Obika could be close to a return, so an extra week's training will have done him a word. The good Callum Butcher, I think, is very close, probably could be involved tomorrow. So it has its positives and it has its negatives of not playing the last weekend. But the big problem both of these sides have is struggle to score goals. I think Motherwell scored 7 and Ross County have scored 6, which means then you're relying heavily on your defence to try and keep clean sheets, because if you're not keeping clean sheets, then you're not scoring at the other end. That means the balance isn't very good. So I expect tomorrow to be a close encounter. I mean, Ross County went to Dundee during the week and it was 0-0. It'll be something similar. Can somebody nick a goal? It won't be a goal fest. But ultimately for both sides, it's about trying to build some confidence, trying to rebuild some momentum so they can keep themselves either where they are, Motherwell in the top 6, or Ross County to try and get away from the bottom. Yeah,
it's an interesting point you make about results against teams that you maybe expect to be in and around you, because people went to, I think I heard someone saying, it was maybe a good point on Tuesday for Ross County away at Dens Park, but these are the games you really need to be winning, don't you? If you want to have any ambition of maybe pushing for the top 6, it's when you meet the sides around you that actually a draw isn't a good result. And Ross County, I think, have won 1 in 5.
Yeah, and that goal they had disallowed, I think, was a little bit harsh on them. Jordan White, did he interfere with play? Did he not? And you always talk about small margins. It always seems to be talking about small margins in the big games, but even more so when the smaller clubs are playing against each other. And their main aim, probably first and foremost, is to make sure they're a top flight club. These big decisions can go against them. So, I mean, when you come together, one of your so-called rivals, you're looking around individually to think who can step up, who can make the difference, who's the one that can put their head above the parapet and turn that 0-0 draw, that 1-1 draw, into a 2-1 victory on your behalf. Both sides have got plenty of strikers. Unfortunately, they're not goal-scoring strikers at this moment in time. So you're hoping somebody can produce a little bit of magic. Ross County, it's their second away game in 4 days. I think they've got one against Hibs on Wednesday. So this is a really tough spell for them. You're on the coach, you're up and down the road, you're on the I-9. Fatigue. You want good results to try and keep that feel-good factor and try and keep the morale high. So it really looks like a big game. I think there's only 2 points between the teams. If Motherwell suddenly won the game, it's 5 again. If Ross County win it, they go above them. So there's certainly plenty of motivation for both teams.
Right, next up, St Mirren against St Johnstone. St Mirren have obviously had to wait a while to get over that defeat by Rangers, that first defeat of the season in the league. And St Johnstone still waiting on that first win. 10 without a win in all competition. There's obviously none in the league. 1 win in 12 this season. That was against Alloa in the League Cup. I mean, we keep saying it. It's week on week. When are they going to get this first win, St Johnstone?
You're right. And I think the longer it goes, the more concern there is. You're having to continually challenge the players every week. You're trying to encourage them. You're trying to give them positive messages. But if results aren't forthcoming and you're not getting that win, spirit goes a little bit within the squad. You've got to make sure that you try and keep players' heads up. You don't want to become detached at the bottom of the table. And, talking about teams not scoring goals, I mean, scoring goals has been a major issue for St Johnstone this season. I think it's only, 3 league goals this season. So it's a tough job for Steve McLean trying to continually pick players up. And that's him being an inexperienced manager. He's the one that's having to go in and try and convince the players that he can go and make something happen. And it's funny, Thomas, I had a little look before we came on, and so after St Johnstone's double cup win in 2021, their following 2 seasons, they finished 11th and stayed up through the playoffs. Last season they finished 9th, but that was only with a little bit of a rally at the end. Callum Davidson clearly lost his job because they weren't in a good position, and here they are now sitting bottom of the table without a win after 10 games. It's been a gradual decline and a fall away from St Johnstone. When you normally think that a club like that, if they'd won the double cup competition, it would have galvanised everyone and pushed them on. But for some reason, it's had the adverse effect of Johnson. So they really need to arrest the slide as soon as possible. The manager needs a win for his own self-esteem and his own self-belief, but also the players. They have to dig deep and try and get it. But, I mean, it's going to be a tough venue. St Mirren are a good side. they'll be wanting to win for their own reasons. I think it's 3 without a win. They want to maintain being in third place. They don't want to undo all the good work they've done up to this point. So they will absolutely go right after St Johnstone early on and look for any weakness that may show.
Livingston v Dundee. Livingston obviously one of the few teams in action last week. Tough loss at Killie. Dundee, I think they've drawn 4 of the last 5 games. So I think Tony Docherty's been saying it all season. They've been really competitive. They've definitely shown they can mix it in the top flight. But again, it's just about turning these into victories sooner rather than later.
Well, it's a lack of goal threat as well. I mean, I'm talking about Motherwell and St Johnstone and Ruston.
It is a common theme. It's a common theme.
It is. It's the hardest thing in football, Thomas. And when you're shopping in a market where you can't go and overspend or you can't go and splash the cash, then you're having to hope that someone has an incredible season or can suddenly hit a little purple patch, which can just change the direction of your season completely. But you look at so many teams, they're so evenly matched. And if you're a betting man or woman and you're looking at the weekend trying to pick a coupon or trying to split teams, it's almost impossible because you're looking around thinking, well, they don't have a threat, they don't score goals, they're maybe tied at the back. Then what happens is everyone starts to match up. 3-5-2 seems to be the formation. Let's get more defenders in the team where we can get 2 strikers but with no width. So everybody's trying to fight for the same thing and trying to take it towards the same place. But Livingston last week, I have to say, were very poor. I was at the game down at Rugby Park. Just didn't think they looked themselves at all. I didn't really understand what they were trying to do. The tactics didn't look right. So that'll be a huge frustration for Davy Martindale, and I expect a big response from them. But when you're Dundee and you're looking for a result, when you're looking for a win, Livingston probably isn't the place to go to. I'd imagine it's going to be a physical encounter. It'll be a feisty game. There'll be lots of balls into the box. So Tony Docherty's men may have to show another side to the game. I think I've watched them a few times and they've been pleasing on the eye. They've been good to watch. They haven't had that cutting edge, but they're certainly going to have to defend their box tomorrow against Livingston, because the one thing is they'll put you under pressure.
Yeah, sure to be another intriguing game. That's Saturday's action then. As I said, Hibernian Celtic live, commentary on Sports Sound. The rest will be covered as usual on Open All Mics, highlights on Sports Scene as well, 7:30 BBC Scotland. Let's have a quick look at Sunday's games now because they're big. Obviously, the lunchtime kickoff, you were at Pittodrie on Thursday for Aberdeen's dramatic, gut-wrenching really defeat by Pauk. They go to Kilmarnock, who had a big win against Livingston at home, as we mentioned. And, it's another one that, we've repeated a lot, Stephen, over the last 12 to 18 months at Kilmarnock. It's just, they are just a different prospect at home, and that's a tough game, and Aberdeen just need to bounce back. They've only won 2 and 8 this season in the league.
Yeah, and as much as Aberdeen are enjoying the big European nights, well, not enjoying them, of course they lost last night, but enjoying the occasions, big atmospheres. There's a different feel around those kind of games, having been involved in some over the years. But ultimately, your bread and butter is your league form. Can't keep canvassing poor league form just because you're playing in European competition. They have to go down to Rugby Park, who will, Kilmarnock will take the game to them. I thought they were excellent last week. I would imagine it's probably their most complete performance of the season. And I know people will point out that they beat Rangers in the opening day and they beat Celtic in the Cup. But just as an all-round performance with regards to defending well, being solid in midfield, carrying a threat at the top end of the pitch. I mean, they beat Livingston 3-1 and it could have been 5 or 6. Kyle Vassell led the line really well. The energy of Brad Lyons and Daniel Armstrong and young David Watson was great. You talk about setting the benchmark for your team. That's exactly what Derek McInnes will want time and time again, home and away for Kilmarnock. Sometimes it's impossible to get to that level, but you have to try and get as close to it as you possibly can. So they will be desperate for this game to start. They know that Aberdeen will be a little bit down. They've had a long travel down, that sickening result. If they're feeling sorry for themselves, then Kilmarnock are going to really test them and put them under the cosh. But Barry Robson's side have to show a different side now. They have to go and show a resilience and a resolve and show that they can win a game irrespective of how they play. Performance, I think, is completely irrelevant. Doesn't matter if you play well or not. Can you go and dig out a result at a really tough venue? That's how you can convince your players that you can keep moving forward.
And Rangers Hearts sort of speaks for itself, Stephen. Again, I feel like it's very similar for conversation that we had about Hibs to Hearts, given the approach, because Stephen Naismith, I wasn't quite sure what they want to be a possession-based team, but when you're against the quality the side that they were, Celtic, last week, they really struggled until they were 3-0 down, and then they played quite well after that, and then they've got to go to Ibrox. I think they've not beaten Rangers in 9 attempts. So again, it's how you adapt and learn from the week before.
Well, totally, manager and players learning from it, Thomas. But if you want to be a possession-based team, then you have to make sure when you win possession, you have to keep it first and foremost. You can talk about being possession, you can talk about whatever you want. The players have to be brave enough to keep the ball. They have to just tick the game over. They can't continually turn the ball over. And if they go tomorrow and they play as open and there's naive defensively as what they were last weekend, Rangers will punish them as well. So as much as Stephen Naismith has a game plan in his mind of how ideally he wants to play the game, sometimes you have to change. Sometimes you have to pick a team and play a system that maybe isn't what you want to do, but it means you get a result and it keeps you in a job and it gives the players a little bit of belief, then absolutely that's what you have to do. So, don't be frightened to change. I think that's the key for it. And, Rangers, it's been a tough couple of games for them, no doubt about it. A little bit of travel in between. It's tough for the manager coming in, trying to change the style within the season when there's lots of games going on, minimal training time on the pitch. And I imagine a lot of it will be walk and talk through the training ground. It will be video analysis. It will be done on the tactics board just to try and get his message across. Plus, then you look at Rangers with so many players out injured, not really having the options to freshen things up. So if there's a wee chance for Hearts on Sunday, you've got to do what we said. They've got to defend well. They've got to make sure they get men behind the ball. But ultimately, they still have to have that threat in the counter-attack. And that's probably the one thing they've lacked, is a centre-forward with raw pace, real pace. Josh Ginnelly was a big loss for them moving in the summer. Shankland and Boyce have got good attributes, but do they take you up a pitch away from home when you're trying to defend deep? Probably not. So Stephen Naismith's going to have to get the balance right. But Rangers will hope that if they can perform as they did last week against Hibs, they can get 3 points. Plus, with Celtic playing before them, they can't afford that lead to get any bigger.
Okay, Stephen, thanks. Another cracking weekend reviewed, previewed, and to look forward to, I should say, obviously live commentary of both those Sunday games as well on Sports Sound on air from 11:45, starting with the action at Rugby Park, followed by Rangers against Hearts, and you'll get the highlights on Sports Scene as well, BBC Scotland channel on Sunday too. My thanks to Stephen Craigan. That's it for this edition of the Scottish Football Podcast. Bye for now.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.